Well, you know, it's a crooked ad. I heard he's airing it. Canada, that's why I pulled everything. With Canada, they did a crooked ad. They knew it was Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. What they did is really dishonest. And I heard they were pulling the ad. I didn't know they were putting it on a little bit more. They could have pulled it tonight.
They're going to pull it Monday.
Well, that's dirty playing. But I can play dirtier than they can, you know?
Nuclear, a few days ago, I launched with my good friend, Premier Ford. Did I say good friend, Premier Ford? I said the always entertaining, no, the always interesting, the always unpredictable Premier Ford. Yeah, God, sorry, I don't know why I mixed the two up, President and Premier Ford. Is that on, by the way? No.
Doug Ford needs to resign. Not next week, not after another apology tour, today. Because what just happened isn't a simple political blunder. It's a full-blown act of international sabotage paid for by you, the taxpayer. Let's get this straight. Doug Ford thought it was a good idea to spend $75 million of your money to run an ad campaign in the United States using clips of Ronald Reagan to lecture Republican voters about tariffs. Let's think about that. The Premier of Ontario, a Canadian province, literally tried to manipulate the political conversation in another country. And what happened? Exactly what any half-competent person could have predicted. It blew up in our face. President Trump just responded calling the ad fraudulent, accusing Canada of foreign interference and terminating all trade negotiations with us. So congratulations, Doug. You've just managed to make Justin Trudeau look like the responsible one. I mean, let's pause here. Why in God's name is the Premier of Ontario wading into U.S. trade politics, spending tens of millions of our dollars to do it when our hospitals are understaffed, our schools are broke, and our economy is choking on debt? He didn't just waste $75 million, he torched decades of trade relationships that support millions of Canadian jobs, just to make a flashy ad that Republicans were never going to listen to in the first place.
Boy. So once again, we got to talk about Canada finding out, because as you guys have probably noticed, there are a lot of countries that are currently doing trade deals with the United States of America. Notice how the mainstream liberal media has stopped boohoo whining and crying about where the trade deals, right? When you have all these countries that are doing trade deals, they're doing exactly what I said they were going to do, and it just takes time, right? And the deals are coming together, but oddly enough, Canada, they are still holding out, right? They're holding out, trying to get whatever deal they're looking for from the United States of America, and they're just making it worse, right? They're making it harder because ultimately at the end of the day, Canada needs us more than we need Canada, but for whatever reason, the leaders of Canada are having a hard time figuring that out, okay? And it is hurting the citizens of Canada. But then again, this is what they voted for, right? I think that President Trump kind of has a point when he claims that Canada is the 51st state, right? Because quite literally, the U.S. election decided the Canada prime minister election, okay? I mean, that is the only reason that Mark Carney won, is because there are a lot of Trump deranged individuals in Canada, right? Kind of crazy. So with that being said, Premier Doug Ford of Ontario, he stepped in some mud because he decided to spend $75 million of Canadian government money running an ad, an anti-Trump ad, using Ronald Reagan in order to attack President Trump over his tariff policies, which are intended to get the United States better trade deals, okay? And that is what led to President Trump responding, retaliating with more tariffs on Canada. And I want to talk about it, but first I want to go ahead and play a clip of the ad in question that pissed off the Trump administration. Take a look.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
I heard that the president heard our ad,
I'm sure he wasn't too happy, but it's real because it was coming from the best president the country's ever seen, Ronald Reagan. So it's very effective. It's probably one of the best ads I've ever seen, and it's coming from Ronald Reagan's voice. And it's going to be focused on right across the country, but also in Republican-held areas.
Yeah, so the worst part about this ad is that it was selectively edited to exclude the part of the ad where Ronald Reagan goes on to explicitly support selective tariffs. Okay, so tariffs used strategically in order to protect American jobs. Yeah, that is also what Ronald Reagan believed in. But for whatever reason, Doug Ford, the Ontario premier that decided to spend $75 million on his ad, decided that, let's go ahead and just leave that out, right? Let's leave that part out of it.
It hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth.
Yeah, so again, we're talking about an ad that was not truthful being aired in the United States of America in Republican states, okay? Republican districts, Republican areas, in order to undermine the current trade negotiations that are happening between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. Now, again, this came from Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario. So, again, not even the leader of Canada, okay? Just, again, some premier, okay? Yeah. Obviously, this was not going to end up well, okay, because the Trump administration has responded by levying more tariffs on Canada in response to this very, very, very stupid ad. Take a look.
Good evening. We begin tonight with developing news and the latest volley in the trade war. The U.S. president hitting Canada with an extra 10% tariff. His response to the nation not pulling a television commercial he says is fake, calling it a hostile act. The increase coming as a surprise to the prime minister, according to government sources. We have team coverage on this matter. CTV's Colton Prail starts us off.
Donald Trump is upping the ante on Canadian tariffs. In a social media post tonight, Trump says he is increasing tariffs an additional 10% over and above what Canada is now paying. He blames an anti-tariff TV advertisement the Ontario government made featuring Ronald Reagan. It's not clear which specific tariffs Trump is targeting. The 35% baseline tariff on Canada, where most goods are exempt because of the free trade agreements, or the sectoral tariffs that are doing the most damage to the Canadian economy, or both.
If it's 10% on top of the 35% on non-consumer originating goods, that's probably not going to have a huge impact.
Meanwhile, Trump is also accusing Canada of trying to influence the U.S. Supreme Court, where next month Trump's broadest tariffs are facing a court challenge and could be deemed illegal in what would be a major blow to the president's trademark policy.
The United States is still trying to negotiate a number of trade agreements. And to the extent that there's a negative Supreme Court decision, it is likely that all the various trading partners are not going to be so eager to rush to the table.
Those deals are also part of the reason Donald Trump is traveling to Asia, where he's expected to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump has threatened China with new 100% tariffs in their ongoing trade war, and some say Trump's latest attack on Canada could be connected.
So this may be the time to show some strength in the American position and show that he is willing to continue applying tariffs and try to bring people to the table and extract some concessions in any deals.
Despite Trump's social media threats, he still needs to sign an executive order to actually enforce a tariff increase and to detail where and why the costs are rising.
Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent weighed in on this when pressed by Kristen Welker on President Trump levying these tariffs, these 10% tariffs on Canada. This is what he had to say.
Let's talk about another major trade issue, which is Canada, of course. This week, President Trump abruptly broke off trade talks with Canada and put another 10% tariff on Canada in response to an ad that the government of Ontario ran. It features former President Ronald Reagan. Why is the president setting trade policy based on a television ad he doesn't like?
Again, this question is so stupid to me, right? Like, again, imagine if the U.S. government paid millions of dollars to air ads in other countries, basically pushing a message that is against the leadership in that country, right? Imagine if we did that. Imagine how upset the foreign government would be if we did that to them. That is what Canada did to us, right? I mean, what he did was just disrespectful. It was really stupid. And this is a very stupid question. I mean, the president is understandably upset. I would be pissed off, right? I'll be pissed off, to be honest with you.
Well, Kristen, let's think about this. This is a kind of propaganda against U.S. citizens. You know, it's psyops. Why would the government of Ontario? I'm told that they have spent or were planning to spend up to $75 million on these ads to come across the U.S. border. So what was the purpose of that other than to sway public opinion? And, you know, it's some kind of propaganda that the premier of Ontario unilaterally launched.
Will the 10% tariffs apply to all Canadian goods, Mr. Secretary?
Kristen, I've been traveling since this unfortunate event happened. I know that the ad's been taken down. So, you know, we'll have to see. But I just think it was terrible judgment by this premier, you know, who has a bit of a reputation for being a hothead.
Does the president know if the tariffs will apply to 10% tariffs will apply to all Canadian goods? Has he made a determination about that?
Well, I'm sure he knows, and I'm sure the Ambassador Greer knows. But again, you know, we're here out in Asia, and we're doing these big trade deals out in Asia. We just signed the Malaysian deal today, which was fantastic. And, you know, I've been spending the past 2 days negotiating with the Chinese. So, you know, whatever is going on back in North America, I think is taking second fiddle to President Trump's leadership out here in the Pacific.
Okay, let me ask you about...
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. That is the position of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, okay? We're going to see exactly what happens in regards to how these tariffs are going to apply. But again, understandably, the president is pissed off. This is what Mark Carney had to say at the economic conference that is currently happening in Asia, right?
Yeah, I'll just make a few comments. Look, as I emphasized the other day, the government of Canada stands ready to build on the progress that we had been making in our negotiations, our discussions with our American counterparts. And we have a consistent focus in those discussions on doing the best deal for Canadian workers and their families. It is the sole responsibility of the government of Canada to have those discussions with the United States, and it's the best way forward. And as I say, we stand ready. Now, we are capable of doing more than one thing at one time. You'll be seeing within the course of the next 2 weeks an ambitious budget which makes generational investments in Canada, and we are in the process of diversifying our trade relationships, the focus of our meetings here in Asia. And those are tangible. We have an intention to more than double our exports away from the United States over the course of the next decade. That's more than $300 billion. We agreed already today with the president of ASEAN, Dr. Ibrahim, and next year's president of ASEAN, the president of the Philippines, President Marcos, the intention to conclude the ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement by next year. In addition, we announced that we will be initiating free trade talks with the Philippines with a similar deadline. So accelerated free trade talks with the Philippines, Canada and the Philippines. And of course, in recent weeks, we just concluded the free trade agreement between Canada and Indonesia. So building at home, diversifying our trade relationships abroad, and being ready to work with the United States government as and when the time comes.
All I got to say is this. Canadians, Canadian people, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? Was it worth it? Was it worth it to vote for this guy, right, because of your Trump derangement? Now, here's the thing. I like Canadians. I think Canadians are very nice people, right? And I wish the best for Canada. But I don't think your leadership does, because this guy, Doug Ford, who, again, is a premier. For whatever reason, he thought it'd be a good idea to run an ad in another country, specifically against the leadership in that country, while you're supposed to be negotiating a trade agreement, okay? That, you know, Canada, for the most part, they don't have very much leverage over the United States of America, okay? Canada needs the United States of America. Let's be real, okay? And your economy is currently hurting because of the fact that your leadership refuses to put their egos aside and to negotiate in good faith, right? To come to a trade agreement just like every other country's doing, okay? Japan's doing it. You have the UK doing it. The EU is doing it. Every other country, right? Even China, who knows, okay? Even China seems to be willing to play ball, at least to a certain degree, right? All of these other countries, major countries are, you know, coming to the table. But Canada, on the other hand, they'd rather continue to play games, right? And I just think that these games don't really benefit the Canadian people. They really don't, okay? But then again, when you think about it, again, this is what you voted for. You guys literally voted for this guy because you hate Trump. And this is what you get when you make decisions out of Trump derangement, right? You just get more economic hardship, right? Look at what's happening to the Democrat Party in America, right? Look at where Trump derangement has gotten them, okay? The approval rating is damn near in the single digits. That is where you're headed, right? Because clearly, Trump derangement causes cognitive impairment, right? You have to be cognitively impaired to think that it would be a good idea to run political ads in a foreign country against the leadership. A country that you need, okay? That you're kind of dependent on when it comes to trade, right? It's kind of funny how that works. So, you know, to me, I just feel like at some point, the Canadian people need to actually make responsible decisions when it comes to their leadership. And as long as they continue to vote the way that they're voting, this is what you're going to get, right? You cannot let Trump derangement drive your decisions. And every time you let Trump derangement drive your decision, then that just ends up backfiring. It backfires every single time, okay? And that's what's happening here. What did you get out of this? Seriously, what did you get? Because the whole point of the ad was to sway the opinion of the American people in order to do what? To influence policy in the United States of America, right? Because ultimately, Canada wants less tariffs, right? They don't want the tariffs. They're trying to avoid tariffs, right? They want a better trade relationship. But you ended up getting the exact opposite of what you wanted from running the ad, okay? Because you ran the ad, and the ad ended up backfiring. Now you have what? More tariffs, right? You have more tariffs, which is exactly what you didn't want. So, again, it's beyond me. Why is it that these individuals, you have grown people continuing to make decisions based off Trump derangement? And when you're Trump deranged, you're not thinking properly, because only a cognitively impaired person would have thought that this was a good idea to run this ad and to believe that there would be a good outcome from it. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.